Hello and good afternoon, TVI viewers. Welcome to CrossRoads with Neethan Shan. As you know, CrossRoads is a weekly talk show dedicated to discussing a variety of topics that are relevant to the social, economic, political, and cultural advancement of Tamil Canadians. Tamil youth have been known, celebrated, and recognized in the Canadian society for an active participation in the social, economic, cultural, and political realms of this country. Has the leadership levels within our youth population reached the level where it should be? Should there be more work done to foster leadership among Tamil youth in high schools, post-secondary institutions, and the workforce? Youth, one of our biggest assets in our community, often feel there needs to be more spaces opened up, more forums provided so that they can present their voices and be heard. Today on CrossRoads, we will focus on youth leadership in the Tamil community. Here to begin discussing this crucial topic, we have three amazing young leaders. Let me start by introducing them. Thivya Shanthakumar, you are a Vice President with Canadian Tamil Youth Alliance, CTYA, and Pranavan Ganeshalingam. Pranavan is the Chair of CTPA, Canadian Tamil Professional Association, and Sangami Jeyachandran is with Canadian Tamil Youth Development Center, CanTide, as a youth outreach worker. Thank you very much for joining us, and it's a pleasure to have young leaders with us on this show. So let's start with talking about where we're at. What are you seeing? And I know each of you work with different demographics, and maybe I'll start with Sangami, because you work with high school youth predominantly, and your organization dedicated to empowerment of young people in high schools and so on. So what are you noticing in high school in terms of leadership skills? Are we seeing a lot of prominent development of skills? Is there some skills that are lacking? Where we are at?
Generally, there has been an increase with Tamil youth and in leadership, especially with volunteering and community involvement. It's probably because things have changed in the last 5 to 10 years. There are more opportunities, and there's more fields that they're interested in, and also they're pretty good with communication, and they have social media now, so that's a great platform.
Everybody's a journalist.
Yeah, basically they share things, and they learn things also. So definitely there has been a great increase.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and you work as an outreach worker in high schools, right?
Yeah.
And so is this common? What you're noticing is equally seen in both genders, men and young women, or is there one more?
I would say women are slightly above the men,
which is a good thing.
Yeah, it's true. It's more empowering for women. Yeah, and with boys, it just takes them a little bit longer. Not so much in grade 9, grade 10, but as grade 11, 12 hits, they start to think about these sort of things. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So let's move on to the university and colleges and that age group. Now you work with an organization that engages a lot of young people from post-secondary institution to be part of various initiatives. So what kind of leadership skills are you noticing? Are there particular skills that are more evident than other skills?
Well, firstly, just the whole jump from high school to university really changes students. And I think we're starting to see a lot more confident youth within our community. Specifically, I would also say more women within our community. For example, at the University of Waterloo, there's Renish Kamal, who's serving on the Federation of Students. And she's also CEO and founder of the Bike Project, which is actually, they're creating a stress relief tool for children with autism. So there's a lot more creative individuals, I would say. Even their topic of what they're studying in school is a lot more different. It's not just engineering and life science anymore. There's a variety of fields that more students are being engaged in, which is great.
So they're thinking outside the box and not the usual same paths, but one part of leadership is creativity and innovation, and that you're noticing that in your circles as well.
Definitely.
Pranavan, you're part of the CTPA, formerly CTAA, Canadian Tamil Alumni Association, recently transformed into Canadian Tamil Professional Association, because you deal with a lot of young professionals. Yep. And how critical is leadership skills for young professionals, and what is your observation amongst Tamil professionals?
Given my experience with the demographic of the young professional, emerging professional demographic within our community, I see that we have a lot of professionals who are developing, and they're at that employee level, but I see a resistance to move into management and executive level. And I see that said, I see a lot of potential within the community. I see those very basic skills of motivation, that drive is there, but I think what we're lacking is maybe the interpersonal, the communication skills, are what's lacking, and it's what's kind of holding like our youth leaders from taking that leap of faith and moving into management or executive level roles.
But a lot of young people are getting engaged in various leadership levels.
Of course,
the things. Okay,
the interest is definitely there, but and I see a lot of potential. It's just as an organization, we're trying to like really promote and help foster those skills that are lacking to kind of build that package.
Yeah. So what factors are helping? Maybe we can start with you, Pranavan.
So
like externally or internally, what are things that are helping them? Because obviously 15, 20 years ago, there were a lot of factors that exist today did not exist those days, and one of them is being a little bit of more economic prosperity, which lacked in our community, 2 decades ago. Obviously, as a newcomer community, having more time with parents and other things as well, right? So, what are some things that are facilitating leadership in your circle of friends?
So I've noticed, I've come to this observation that there is still that economic struggle is still there. I find like a lot of young professionals still have that that need to support maybe the household, and so that's kind of like preventing them from taking that leap into maybe more riskier kind of leadership roles. Again, that said, also the cultural aspect of our community being very risk averse, and leadership being something where you are stepping outside your boundaries, outside your comfort zone to like lead people, and like it's a riskier move, and that I find people are a little hesitant in that sense.
So is risk taking a trait that you are seeing in high school students? I mean, not in the antisocial activities of it, but in terms of trying out new things, innovative ways, and so is it being encouraged by parents as well?
Yeah, because there is a shift in thinking that there should be a balance between academics and extracurricular, and because there are like young professionals out there who are successful in all these other fields, it's really inspiring to youth, and they're thinking of like photography. Just being an entrepreneur, it's a huge factor that the success of the generation before them has really inspired them. Yeah, definitely.
University life, one of those things that we are noticing in the university life is the ability to handle stress, ability to multitask, and so on. Those are not just necessarily academic success related traits, but also leadership traits as well. And one of the things that university teaches you is that's more important than the curriculum itself is how to handle life, right? So is our young people more equipped to do that in nowadays? Because there's been some instances of young people struggling that we've seen in public life, right? So
yeah, I think the struggle also depends on the social support that they receive. I've personally noticed that a lot more students are going away from home for university, so they live on their own, and that itself comes with a lot of responsibility and leadership skills, because essentially you're on your own. Your parents aren't there to cook and clean for you every day, and you also have to manage for example, paying for rent and things like that, going to school, and then taking care of yourself. Time management, that's a very important skill for a leader. So I feel like that is increasing, and students are having the opportunity to do things like that. I'm not sure how it was maybe even a decade ago if students actually left home for university, if that was even a norm to do that. So that's one important factor that I see is really important. But I do understand that there are students that still struggle, and it's hard to find the balance between, for example, joining a social club at school and focusing on exams. Sometimes they do clash. It's just finding the right balance, and if you have supportive parents as well, that is also helpful in being more involved in the community.
So what else is helping our young people to become leaders in high schools? Do they see themselves as leaders? The concept of leadership sometimes is understood by some young people as having to have followers or having to lead a particular project or something, right? Not necessarily translated into a lifestyle choice of how you live your life. Is that something you're noticing, or is there a shift in terms of what else is happening in schools that can help? How is your program or any other things that are helping young people to become leaders?
I think just the organizations here, they're a good way for youth to bridge through to other resources and opportunities that they can access, because a lot of times youth don't know about these opportunities. So organizations such as our organizations, we definitely provide the resources, or we're, I guess, the ones that help them network into to gaining other, like things like bursaries or volunteer opportunities. They're learning more about it. And I guess the schools are also looking at like what they can bring in, and like there's other organizations working in schools, like Cantide's in schools across Scarborough, and then there's like East Metro Services. They're all in the schools working with youth, so that helps.
So one of the things that we notice is about public speaking, and I don't think it's necessary for everybody to be great public speakers, but our entire life success is revolving around how well we speak or market ourselves, whether it's a job interview or a medical school interview or you know, anywhere, like even presenting yourself in a family setting, and how you're perceived and so on. So public speaking is a critical skill, regardless of what strength is. We've had struggles as a community in terms of you know, cultivating those skills. Is this changing? Is there things that are happening that is changing towards it? Like, for example, we have had world-renowned performers from our community go out and perform in the world, but after performance, if you throw a mic to them and ask questions and stuff like that, the confidence and the kind of self-esteem and the kind of projection, or even kind of feeling motivated to speak more actively about you, is often discouraged. I think we don't tend to boast about ourselves. Some people do, but most people tend to be like. So how is that changing? Is that a struggle in circles?
Like in the professional landscape, you're always trying to sell yourself, right? Whether it be in an interview, via resume, when you're networking with people, you're always trying to sell yourself. So as a community, we have, culturally speaking, we are more reserved. Like I see the difference between like a resume I see from someone from our community versus, generally speaking, compared to some of the resumes I've seen from other communities. On one hand, the outside community tends to really boast about themselves, overextend their accomplishments and whatnot. Whereas in our community, I see resumes are very reserved. They're very humble about their accomplishments.
Trying to be factual.
Exactly, and being very detailed, but that goes against like the goal of trying to sell yourself, right? But in terms of public speaking communication, there is a lot of initiatives that are coming out. Like this is before like even becoming a young adult, before university, before high school. I think it's really important to get them at a really young age. So I'm aware of like the there's the YLP program, the Young Leaders program, where they're really trying to get kids at the really young age, trying to get them out there, put them in front of a microphone, put them on stage in front of an audience, and just at that young age is when you can kind of fight those fears, those public speaking fears, and kind of get them out there and throw them out into like the limelight and have those experiences and kind of teach them the skills of communication and public speaking.
Yeah, I got to say, it's not just young people. I mean, even the older generation or middle-aged and so on, if you, even to request a song, you know, if a media is asking them to request a song, they're shy. And they're like, it is something that we are confronting as a community, and not just our community. There are other communities that are examples of that as well. Is that something that high school kids are overcoming? You said they are having better communication skills in social media and so on, right? But is it also translated in verbal communication?
I guess when they see like just the general culture, they're definitely better off than what I guess we were maybe 5-10 years ago, because I think with Eastern cultures it's more about, you don't show emotion as much, everything is sort of bottled in, you conform to a certain, you know, norm, but with like Western standards and stuff, you have to show yourself, you have to stand out to like, you know, get somewhere you want to be, or you know, get a position or whatever it is. So I feel like youth are realizing that, and they're much more social and definitely.
And they're expressive as well, right? Much more expressive than previous generations. And that brings us to kind of a question about gender trends, right? Because Tamil youth don't live in isolation. Tamil youth live along with other youth, right? And so some of the factors we're talking about also connects to other youth as well. Is there a particular aspects of youth culture today that is facilitating leadership?
I think just being able to interact with youth of different race is very beneficial, because just like they mentioned, we're taught to be more humble and quiet, especially girls. We've always been learned to, you know, be quiet and act like a girl. So just the fact that interacting with students of other culture, of other skill sets, you sort of see a different lens, a different perspective on how things are done and how they approach situations as well, which kind of helps you reflect better upon yourself and say, okay, maybe I should do things differently, or, oh, this is not how everyone does it, kind of thing. So I think that's very beneficial.
Just before we take a break, we're talking about external factors. Youth unemployment is high in Ontario, in Canada, in many places. Is that situation bringing in leaders, innovation, creativity, or is it actually working in the reverse, like putting people's moral and motivation down?
So what I've seen is that there is a huge push for entrepreneurialism and innovation and creativity. Youth are starting to realize, like, it's not about getting that 9-to-5 job. It's not about becoming a doctor, engineer, lawyer.
Or a government job.
Or a government job. But some people are in those positions where they have to take on jobs, certain jobs, 9-to-5s or whatnot. But youth are realizing, and they're taking ownership and leadership on themselves and the initiative to kind of pursue other ventures where they're stepping out of their comfort zones. And I think they're kind of just rolling with the punches and trying to like learn these skills as they go. They might not be ready, completely ready for it. And it's inspiring, and that to see that youth are not like making those jumps just and like waiting for like to build that toolbox of skills. They're taking those leaps and like rolling with the punches and kind of learning skills as they go.
Yeah. So that's bringing out the best of resilience in our youth as well, not just Tamil youth in general, with unemployment situation being where it is. Youth are finding creative ways to make ends meet and to be employed themselves. So we'll take a quick break now. When we come back, we'll delve a little bit more into the challenges, both external and internal challenges young people face when they're trying to create spaces for leadership. Stay tuned. In a few minutes, we'll continue. Welcome back. You're watching CrossRoads with Neethan Shan. We're talking about youth leadership, the factors that facilitate it, the factors that hinder youth development, youth leadership, and our leaders from our community are giving their insight into this. Let's talk a bit more about challenges, how youth leadership opportunities are being hindered in our community. The reason we're talking about our community, this show is related to Tamil community, but some of these are very common for other communities as well. I just want to preface this because of, the show is in English. It doesn't mean that these are very unique challenges. Some of them are common. Let's talk a bit, you're in the middle of many projects, talent development, human rights projects, and other things as well. This might be a bit of a tricky situation because we do have a lot of those spaces occupied by older generation, maybe in the 50s, maybe, even higher than the 50s and so on. And many of them have held positions for a number of years in many of these places. So does that pose a challenge in terms of young people wanting to do certain things? Where is that? I'm sure there are some adults who are facilitating, supporting young leadership as well, but how does that fit in with what you're trying to do?
I think we're trying to firstly create these youth that can be leaders to be able to obtain those roles. I know it can be a challenge when there are older people that have more experiences, and they may be qualified to be in those roles, but it's important that youth also get this opportunity. It's good to start earlier, so we're trying to give youth the opportunity to develop these skills, so we have 5 different councils, so it's not just focusing on one specific thing. So we have, for example, Human Rights Council, Arts and Cultures Council, so developing youth in all different categories, and also acknowledging their skills. Necessarily, a leader doesn't have to be someone that's always up there speaking, kind of. It can be someone. You can be a leader within yourself. You don't necessarily have to have followers to be a leader. I think that we sometimes forget. You have to be a leader to go to work every day, get up, and you have to motivate yourself as well. So just trying to create more confident youth within our community.
So, there are some organizations in the not-for-profit sector that have realized that there are a lot of spaces that are being held by older generation for years, and have created programs like 20% or 30% of the board of directors be young people.
Yeah.
And there's also term limits and things like that can be brought in, so that newer generation, experience is good, but also innovation and creativity is also good. So perspectives would be balanced, right?
Yeah.
So do you see that benefits in terms of trying to develop partnership where young people can take in those leadership?
Yes, definitely. And even attending some of these events that other older organizations hold gives us the opportunity, volunteering for different organizations, because we don't just want to have youth go into these organizations and just because someone's been there for a longer time, just kick them out and kind of take their position. It's getting to know what the organization is about, kind of getting to know what their values are about, getting to know what their vision, missions are. So just being able to have that opportunity to work with each other is very important as well.
In the professional setting, one of the challenges that often is cited is the various forms of discrimination, whether it's racism or sexism and so on. We talked about young women taking on a lot of leadership roles when they're in high schools and in universities and so on. But when it comes to professional settings, there are a large number of professions that shut the doors for women leadership, and also for people of color. So is that a real challenge? How is that being overcome, and what is your way of addressing that?
So like what I've seen, like in terms of in the professional environment, like that is true a lot of what you said, but like I see that slowly changing. Like women are starting to take more leadership roles, and I think there's
are men starting to step back and give that space, or
well, they're starting to think about succession planning, and they're starting to think about the future, right? Like the older generation will always, the saying goes, like the youth are the leaders of tomorrow, right? So how are they building the opportunities? How are they creating the positive environment and workspaces to allow the younger generation, whether they be male or female, kind of come in and kind of learn the ropes so that they can take over like leadership positions. In respect to your question about like the male-female divide, in my genuine experience, I see a pretty level playing field in the employee to management level. Like I see a lot more, if anything, like in the employee level, I see a lot more women moving up the ranks. And
in which field? Like public services?
So in public services, like in the executive senior management, you'll see a lot more male, being very male dominated, and that's just the nature of the beast. Like it's always been that way, and they like just economically people are staying in roles longer, and there's been a huge gap in terms of hiring, and so that's they haven't been thinking about succession planning, so that's also causing a lot of issues in like the corporate world. But I see the shift happening slowly, and they are building programs and initiatives through internship programs, rotational programs, management trainee programs are trying to pop up in a lot of organizations that are allowing for the younger generation.
But that's critical. The shift doesn't happen naturally, right? There's interventions that are being put in place. Same thing with racialized communities as well. So usually leadership opportunities or even growth comes in through a network. And if the network is not in your own circles, in your own communities, you're not going to have access to networks, right? So how do we address that challenge? Because as a Tamil youth who want to be in a field where it's not reflected, how does one get into that network?
So my response to that is just like even as an organization, as CTPA, like we're also trying to promote like the soft skills, it's the people skills. So like within the Tamil community, like how often do our families like go out for like high-class dinners in restaurants and eat with like 3 different forks and 3 different spoons? How well do we know like the social etiquette of going out to bars after work and kind of schmoozing with and networking kind of thing? And that kind of soft skills, like it's the after work hours that are also very important in making it in like leadership executive positions, especially in the business world I can speak to. And it's building those kind of soft skills. It's also even things as simple as like dressing for success, right? Like how you dress, how you present yourself, how you sell yourself, going back to what we were speaking in the last segment, just it's all one big package, right? And as a community, we're slowly getting there, and we see that we've identified the issues and we're slowly trying to build that, but it's up to organizations like ourselves that put on those programs and services, workshops to kind of educate the greater good
Yeah.
towards that.
I mean, we might not have a lot of time to debate this here, but technically, most of the stuff you mentioned is very Eurocentric too. You know, there are certain cultures who may not want to drink, or there are certain dresses that we have that are not acceptable in general sense, and accent and other things, right? So, I mean, I understand the concern around trying to network within the system, but also there has to be pressures to change the way we look at a particular person just because, or even diversify the options, not always have to have wine and cheese to have the networks, right? And I think that's something the corporate sector is trying to do, but maybe more. Coming to high school situation, you know, I'm a bit older, from the older generation, and when we were in high school, the major issue was around violence and other things, right? One of the things that we felt was the leadership to be able to stay firm and say no to things, and you know, say no to a difficult situation or an unfriendly situation or an antisocial thing, right? So that's also related to how confident somebody is, right? So is that changing? And again, also for women who are being pushed into abusive relationships and so on, right? So that particular situation, are you seeing a lot more leadership there, or is that something that needs to be more focused on?
There needs to be a lot of focus on, I guess there's been a shift from the gang violence, and now it's more about, like you said, abuse and things like mental health is a huge issue right now, and there's still a lot of stigma in the Tamil community. So that's a huge issue that needs to be addressed, because it ranges from things like just basic anxiety to depression within that age group, and also things like self-esteem issues. So a lot of the youth might lack confidence, but there's a lot of factors that play into that. It's very intersectional. I guess things like economical background, and like there's a lot of variance in that. There are youth who are second generation because their parents have been successful and they are pretty, you know, economically stable, and those youth are much more invested and interested and engaged in volunteering and leadership. But then youth who are newcomers or youth who don't have a financially stable household, they tend to not be as confident, or they're not able to access all these opportunities because there's not like a push from the family, or they just don't really know about it even. There's a lack of awareness.
So we talked a lot about economic and social spheres of leadership. Let's talk a bit about the political, both political. One political being very heavily Tamil youth were involved in the human rights situation back home, and right to self-determination related things. So whenever I come in contact with organizers in other communities, they usually give Tamil youth as an example of a group of population that is heavily organized and politically active, right? What are some secrets for that? Why is that happening, and what are some factors that helped us? I mean, obviously there was a struggle for in back home, but is there other things that facilitated it?
I think a lot more education on the topic is really important, and the fact that we do have opportunities for youth to get involved in political campaigns. Or I remember I got really involved during all the protest time, and that's even when, I think my first time in front of like a camera, because there were youth that were involved in talking to media at that time. So that was kind of my first encounter. So just giving youth the opportunity to learn about what's actually happening, and having workshops and seminars that talk about the history is very important, because as soon as someone is more aware about the Tamil history, they're more interested in the struggle as well. So I think just more education is important, and we've seen a lot of that.
So how important is identity in this, like, as a leader? I mean, people identify themselves in different ways, right?
Yeah.
But is the discussion around identity an important component of leadership?
I think it's really important, because seeing a leader, especially, I like to look, if you see someone that's Tamil and that's in a really high position, you're like, oh wow, I can do it. But if they don't identify themselves as a Tamil person, then where is the connection there, right? So I think identity is really important. To me personally, I'm not sure how everyone else feels, but I think it's really important.
And that could be woman, that could be LGBT community, is any dimension of identity as well, right? Coming back to the politics here, I mean, few years back, or maybe a decade or 2 decades back, a lot of the people who were interested in running were older generation, which is, again, I have nothing against them, but this has shifted in our Tamil community. Like a lot of the candidates who have been successful are young people. So how did that change happen? What facilitated, do you think?
So I think,
and in your network of people, because you are with a lot of professionals, are there a lot of people interested in politics, local politics?
I think there's I guess I have two answers to that. Like, to answer the first part of your question, I think the younger generation, the people who came to this country at like the younger age, they've kind of taken upon themselves to make the change. So be the change they wish to see in the world, as Mahatma Gandhi would say. They've kind of taken the initiative and the steps to, like, they're not happy with the way things are, and they feel empowered. They're more educated. They're more aware of opportunities, and they've kind of taken it upon themselves to lead and run for office and whatnot. On the other hand, like, I've also seen from people who, like, if you're talking about like politically here, I've seen in terms of leadership, people have, given the nature of our community, there are also some stigmas around people who do get into politics are stigmatized. There's that preconceived notion of like what a politician is in our community, right? And so I see a lot of people who might be very qualified candidates not taking that leap because of those factors and that preconceived stigma, right? So I see two ways of looking at that.
To be a politician in Canada itself, it's difficult. To be a Tamil Canadian being in politics is a double challenge. Right?
One would think that you have, given the size of the population here, you'd have that huge upper hand, but it also, in a way, like, to be frank, it could work against you as well.
No, definitely. I mean, we're going to take a quick break, but before we take a break, let's talk about the school system a bit. We have a school system that penalizes young people when they do something wrong. There's overwhelming penalties, suspension, expulsion, and other stuff. But at the same time, they also treat them without giving them leadership opportunities, more like kids. We find that teenagers are not given leadership opportunities to run the school, for example. The best the student activity council does is more of the prom than to run school policies and things like that, right? Is that shifting? Because it's almost like a double standard where you have young people being overly held responsible when they do something wrong, but not given the opportunity to be leaders on the other side, right?
To be honest, I don't really see this shift with the schools. They relatively stay the same. It's more of a shift with the youth because they find other ways to do, they find other ways outside of school to be leaders. So,
but that's unfortunate, right? Because you spend a lot of time in school, right? So
exactly.
I want to quickly contradict that. My experience personally has been like in my high school experience, I didn't feel that way. I felt like I could do anything in my high school. Like, I was able to start a club, I was able to run for student council, and I was able to even mingle with like administration, and I was able to initiate a lot of things. So I think that just goes to show like the support system and the network that you have. Is that a Pranavan story, or is it real? Like, because sometimes individual successes are good because that shows the resilience of the person. But is it very common that a lot of people can do that in high schools to kind of have those opportunities? I haven't seen students being turned down. Like, if you come up with a legitimate,
like, for example, anti-racism work, or even when Tamil youth were told that you cannot talk about the war that's happening in Sri Lanka in schools, when you can suspend, expel kid. And then when you have a political discussion, you treat them like, these are kids who wouldn't understand. When 17 year old, 18-year-old should be engaged in some sort of, I'm talking about more, not the fun clubs and not the more hardcore discussion and stuff like that, which is often not, like the gay straight alliance clubs also now, many schools aren't necessarily too much favorable to.
So I guess that's more of the controversial type of topics, and I think like at the high school level especially, the school boards are very hesitant to allow for that and kind of weed that out so that it keeps the peace.
Justice is not just what is the Martin Luther King? Justice is not just a presence of peace. Oh no, I'll get back to that. It's just peace is not enough. It has to be combined with justice, right? So if people are just quiet, just because the setting keeps them quiet. It might be peaceful, but not a just environment. That's exactly what, in different words it is. But we'll come back to that. So we'll take a quick commercial break for a few minutes, and we'll come back and talk a bit about what kind of direct intervention and direct initiatives we can have in our community to foster more leadership. Welcome back. You're watching CrossRoads with Neethan Shan. We're talking about youth leadership and the factors that foster it and the factors that hinder it. And now we will be talking in the last segment more about what kind of programs, interventions, initiatives are necessary within our community to further youth development and youth leadership. Maybe we'll start with high school students, right? Canted is doing an amazing work, but your resources are limited too.
Yeah.
There are so many high schools, there are so many Tamil youth, and you're few of you trying to do what you can within your own spheres of programming. What else can be done for high school youth to foster leadership within our community?
I think a major thing that a lot of people are starting to do, and these are great examples, youth-led initiatives. And when they're engaged and they're invested in the planning and executing process of like a project or even an organization, it's much more like sustainable throughout time. When youth have a voice and a say in what they want or they need to develop, it's much more effective. That I think,
Yeah, I mean, a simple thing could be a $100,000 fund every year for 100 projects. $1,000 for a group of youth to start their own project and deliver would go a long way, because it's for youth by youth, right? So it's sustainable. What about for professional development? In addition to what you're doing, or even including what you're doing, what else could be done? So
like leadership, like I think the community has realized like leadership is not just a title, it's not a role, it's not a position. Like there's all forms of leadership. And so I think our community is starting to embrace that. You can be a leader as an employee, taking on the initiative or leadership with a project or like a task, right? And then on the other end, like in the nonprofit volunteer sector, something as simple as not necessarily having to be part of like a board of directors, but being like a volunteer of a subcommittee, taking those small steps to kind of build those skills. Like even when I look at myself, like it was through volunteer and like nonprofit experiences where I was able to like slowly build some of my leadership skills, the confidence, the people skills, the interpersonal skills. And it's not necessarily like I didn't have a title every step of the way, right? And it's kind of those kind of opening up those opportunities. And I think for us to be stronger within the community, I think like you mentioned about like board positions, like general board, like hospital boards, like school boards, having like opening up the opportunity for youth to be at the discussion table to provide that perspective, I think is really important. And to get our community youth and leaders, young leaders, like into those kind of positions, to give them that exposure to see how like decisions are made like in other communities and like in the greater community, kind of bring that back to the community and kind of be those mentors for the younger generation that's coming up. So is the mentorship happening now? At what extent is it happening? Because again, that's one of the critical areas, because many of our parents' generation had a lot of different waves of immigration, came through different countries, came through different systems of education, and worked hard to settle ourselves here. So mentorship may not directly come from 3 generations of teachers helping the next generation of teacher to get a teaching job, right? Of course. Yeah. So a lot of, like you mentioned, like a lot of the first generation Canadians or immigrants were trailblazers in this country, right? Yeah. But now you're seeing that we've been, like our community has been around for about 25, 30 years, 35 years. And so you see now there's the next generation coming up, and it's more about like the seasoned professionals, looking at it from the professional demographic, the seasoned established professionals, kind of creating those mentorship situations where you can kind of connect young professionals coming out of universities and colleges, and connecting them with established, more seasoned professionals, kind of making that link so that they have someone to look up to. Again, mentorship is very important. Yeah. So this might be, again, just my observation, but may not be statistically true. I find that low-income networks, so people working in factories, people working in Tim Hortons, people working in places, are often bringing others who are of their own background, or people who are related to them, or people who are in their circles to come into those positions. Is it also happening in places where people have access to hire? So when you become
a senior level person, are they helping others, or is there a bit of a reluctance to bring somebody of their own network or background into it? Usually fear of being seen as favoritism and something like that.
Yeah, there's always that fear, right? If I'm gonna use myself as an example, like if I were like in a leadership position, trying to put myself in the shoes of that person, it's more so like you get it. Like at like an employee level, like for example, the example you gave with Tim Hortons, there's a lot more flexibility in being able to bring people, right? Whether they have a resume or not, unqualified, you can bring them in and kind of give them that job. But in a more established organization, it's very tricky, and like especially in our community, like it's an eyesore. When you bring, like if I was a Tamil deputy minister or assistant deputy minister, and I hired a director that was Tamil, people are gonna see that it's an eyesore, right? Like in the
but it wouldn't happen if a white person hired a white person, right? Because technically, if you're the only Tamil person, you've just doubled the 100% increase to the staffing of Tamil people, right? Yeah. But that's the nature of the thing. So are we able to still do it without fearing that? So like,
my personal experience is that people who I look up to, my mentors in like the professional world, have at least, if they can't like directly hire me to give me that opportunity, at least they're empowering me by giving me like providing information. They're offering to meet for like informational interviews and kind of indirectly supporting me in being successful in the role. Maybe not directly under them, but maybe under another ADM, assistant deputy minister or something like that. So like your comment about like the established professional wanting to just hold on to that power and be the only one that...
I wasn't implying that, but I was just asking if that's the case.
I wouldn't say so.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that's changing.
But we do have to recognize that when you have a position of power, and if you're a person of color, there's so much expectation from both the community wanting you to open up the thing, but also from the system itself, always looking at you as whether you are going to be favorable or not. It's an example of a teacher who has a classroom, a Tamil teacher who has a classroom with Tamil kids. There's always the Tamil kids expecting the teacher to be more favorable to them. The teacher always wanting the other kids not to feel like, same thing happens with police officers and stuff like that. So it's a burden that racialized people in underrepresented communities have.
But that's more of a systematic thing, I think.
It's a systematic, and I think that's something that we have to kind of work around. Let's get back to university life, and that's probably where a lot of leadership opportunities open up. We were talking about high school and how restrictive in some ways for an open leadership, whereas university gives you the kind of the space. And sometimes being free from parents also helps in that. So is there enough happening? Are the TSAs doing, like Tamil Student Associations, are there opportunities of leadership, or are they struggling?
Specifically with, you brought up TSAs, I think I can't speak on behalf of all TSAs, of course, but I feel like there can be more that can be done through these. I don't feel like just holding formals is enough for our community, but I know there are TSAs that do hold mentorship workshops or resume workshops to help. They have older students mentoring first-year students, helping them with their resume, helping them get jobs within the community if they're away from home. So there are things that are happening. I do feel like there could be more. There is potential for more. And I know we mentioned that in high school sometimes there isn't that opportunity for students to be leaders, but when they go to university, it's such a short period of time, that from high school to university, and then you're just thrown into this world, and it's hard to kind of figure yourself out and see, okay, what am I good at, or what should I join, or what should I do? So it is a confusing period. So having organizations such as the TSA Club is an easy foot into the door, I would say, but there is potential to do more.
Another level of leadership is through graduate studies, right? Because you become leaders in those subject matter, right? So if you do graduate studies in education, you become almost, well versed in the topics and so on. Is that happening as much, or because generally, are we seeing more students going into post-graduate studies, particularly graduate programs?
I would say yes, especially with our developing world. Sometimes university and college degrees aren't enough anymore. Yeah. So there are students that are pursuing post-secondary graduate schools, but then there is the confusion as to, okay, what should I focus on now? Because graduate schools, they're topics are very specific, but you can do your topic on anything that you choose. So I think there needs to be better mentorship and workshops regarding graduate programs that are available for students, and having mentors that have done a master's or PhD in our community, mentoring these young university students.
Yeah, that's critical, because I think we need to provide space to the people who have done masters or PhDs to kind of take their wealth of knowledge and share it with the rest of the community, because we don't see conference spaces and summits and things like that where they could come and present some of the things within our own communities, right? So, like maybe trying to wrap up with the last question about high school students. What else can be done to look at intersectionalities? Now, we talk about youth in general. We didn't have a lot of time to talk about young women, maybe youth with disabilities, LGBTQ youth, newcomer youth. There are a number of young people who fall into different intersectionalities and multiple barriers, right? Yeah. Is there things happening in schools or high schools or through your programs that are addressing some of the things? Because when you offer universal program, the most powerful within that segment reaches it, right?
Yeah. I think schools are starting to have things like equity or diversity inclusion workshops and seminars. So there are a couple coming up. They have, like Asian Heritage Month, Tamil Heritage Month. So they're practicing these things at school. So that's really helpful. But things like what we can do as a community is like, I guess when you talk about women, LGBTQ and stuff, it's the stigma. Yeah. So what can we do to raise awareness in our communities, in the older generation, about how to like break through that, and how can we empower these people that are marginalized or
within our own communities?
Exactly.
Yeah. So we want to finish up with maybe a personal question about what's next for you, because the community's growth depends on individuals' growth. Individual leaders actually make the community grow. So maybe we'll go from Thivya. What's next for you as a leader in our community? What are some issues you want to passionately follow, or career that you want to follow?
So to start, so I'm currently, I go to the University of Waterloo. I'm going into my final year in the health studies program. So I've always been passionate about health. So I'm hoping to do my master's in public health once I graduate. So I'm more passionate about heart disease and cancer, especially because it affects a lot of the Tamil community. So
South Asians have higher chances of heart attack.
Exactly. So I'm hoping to do something valuable within that field in the near future.
Great. Pranavan?
For myself, like in the nonprofit sector, like even as chair of CTPA, this is me stepping out of my comfort zone to kind of get more experience with public speaking and like the communication skills where I felt like I've lacked. I'm trying to build those skills. Professionally speaking, like I foresee myself being like a leader in the public sector, specifically like professionally in the finance and the business worlds is something that I'm pursuing. And so with that,
to help mentor and others.
Exactly, and with CTPA, trying to build that, like help other young professionals kind of come up as well and get into executive level positions in the corporate sphere or into more professional scenarios.
How about you, Sangami?
Well, I'm still in school and I'm studying environmental science.
Nice.
So my initial goals were in international development and working with marginalized parts of the world. And they have a lot of environmental issues, and that's sort of my long-term goal. But I am really interested in community development now that I'm involved, and just having this grassroots approach to dealing with our our own issues in our community. Yeah.
That's nice. We do need more environmental justice initiative in our community, but also environmental justice movement needs a lot more people with community development background. So that's a perfect binary combination that you have. So thank you very much for taking the time, and good luck to your organization, CTYA, CTPA, and CanTide. There's a lot of acronyms here, but you're doing amazing works for many years, and very important niche that's being fulfilled with very, very limited resources, with a large number of volunteers helping out. So thank you for all the work you do, and thanks for sharing your insights as well. So thank you, viewers, for watching the show. We had a deep discussion about youth leadership and what can be done to improve the situation and foster more leaders in our community. Hope you found the show useful. In a week, we'll meet you with another topic. Thank you.